Ciao, and welcome to Immersion Travel Italy. I'm Katerina Ferrara, author of the Travel Italy book series, blogger, and your host. This podcast is about experiencing Italy beyond the checklist, slowing down, paying attention, and understanding places not just for what we see, but for why they matter. We continue our journey through the Regional Capitals of Italy series, moving region by region, north to south, discovering not places on a map, but layers of history, culture, faith, architecture, and everyday life that make each region distinct. This is episode 18 of 20 in the series. So far on this journey, we've started in the north and visited the elegant canals of Venice, the soaring Duomo in Milan. We explored the spiritual center of Assisi. We discovered the raw landscapes of Basilicata and the quiet resilience of Potenza. We wandered through Le Marche, where Adriatic light meets Renaissance beauty. Each region has its own personality. And today we're in the south, the toe of the Italian boot, in Calabria. Calabria is dramatic. It is rugged mountains that drop into two seas. It's ancient Greek colonies and Byzantine monasteries. It's Norman castles, Aragonese fortresses, and villages that seem suspended in time. It's fierce, regional pride, powerful devotion, and traditions that have endured through earthquakes, invasions, and centuries of migration. And at the center, perched between the Ionian and Tyrrhenian coasts, stands the regional capital, Catanzaro, often overlooked but deeply rooted. In today's episode, we'll explore Calabria's early history, its medieval transformations, and how it became one of Italy's most complex and resilient regions. We'll walk through Catanzaro, the historic center. We'll talk about the silk traditions and the strategic role it plays. We'll explore key sites, landscapes, and cultural rhythms that defined the southern frontier. Because Calabria is not a region you can skip. It's a region you feel. So settle in and we'll head to the south. But before we walk the streets of Catanzaro, we need to understand something important. Calabria is ancient, older than the Romans. Long before Rome rose to power, before Florence flourished, before Venice commanded the seas, the southern land was already part of a sophisticated Mediterranean world, the Magna Grecia, Greater Greece. Beginning in the 8th century BC, Greek settlers arrived along Calabria's Ionian coast. They established powerful colonies that would become part of what we know as Magna Grecia. Cities like Crotone, Locri were not outposts. They were thriving centers of philosophy, mathematics, athletics, and law. Crotone, today known as Crotone, became famous as the home of Pythagoras. Yes, that Pythagoras, the mathematician whose theories we learned in school lived and taught here in southern Italy in the 6th century BC. The town of Locri developed one of the earliest known written law codes in the Greek world, and Rhegion, now known as Reggio Calabria, became a key maritime hub connecting Sicily to mainland Italy. The coast was prosperous, intellectual, and strategic. And from this era come two of Italy's most extraordinary architectural treasures, the Race bronzes. Discovered off the coast in 1972, these life-size 5th century BC Greek warrior statues are now displayed in Reggio Calabria. They're considered among the finest surviving bronze sculptures in the ancient world. When Rome expanded southward in the 3rd century BC, Calabria became part of the Roman Republic and later the Empire. The Romans built roads, ports, villas, and agricultural estates. Calabria's position between the Ionian and Tyrrhenian seas made it strategically vital for trade and military movement. Grain, olives, wine, and livestock moved through these lands. But Calabria never lost its Greek imprint. Even under Roman rule, Greek language and culture persisted strongly in many areas. In fact, parts of southern Calabria still preserve traces of ancient Greek dialect traditions today. This blending of Greek and Roman identity is part of what makes Calabria feel different from northern Italy. It always looked as much east as west. After the fall of the Western Roman Empire in the 5th century AD, Calabria did not immediately become medieval in the way we imagine. Instead, it became Byzantine. For centuries, the Eastern Roman Empire governed this region. Orthodox Christianity shaped religious life. Monastic communities formed in remote mountain valleys. One of the most beautiful symbols of this era, La Cattolica in Stilo, a small 10th century Byzantine church crowned with 5 domes, nestled into a hillside overlooking the Ionian Sea. It almost feels like something you would expect to find in Greece, not Italy. This Byzantine influence deeply marked Calabria's architecture, spirituality, and identity. Then the Normans arrive. In the 11th century, everything shifted. The Normans, originally Vikings who had settled in northern France, moved into southern Italy. Under leaders like Robert Guiscard, they conquered Calabria and Sicily, unifying territories that had been divided between the Byzantines and the Lombards. The Normans strengthened fortifications, built castles, and brought Calabria firmly into the Latin Christian world of Catholicism, aligned with Rome. This was a time of consolidation, but Calabria's layered identity remained. Greek foundations, Roman infrastructure, Byzantine spirituality, Norman military power. And unlike cities that reinvented themselves dramatically in the Renaissance, Calabria remained rugged, independent. Its mountains protected its villages, its coasts connected outward. In the 16th century, southern Italy, including Calabria, came under the rule of the Spanish crown. The Kingdom of Naples was governed from afar, and Calabria became a part of a vast imperial system stretching from Madrid to the Americas. This was not a golden age for Calabria. Heavy taxation weighed on the population. Feudal structures tightened. Local barons held power over land and peasants. Coastal towns were fortified to defend against Ottoman raids, which were very real threats along the shores. You still see the legacy of this era in the Aragonese castles and the coastal watchtowers scattered both on the Ionian and Tyrrhenian seas. In the 18th century, control shifted again. The Bourbon dynasty took power and Calabria became part of the Kingdom of Two Sicilies. There were efforts at modernization, roads improved, some administrative reforms were introduced, but Calabria remained economically fragile. Agriculture dominated, large estates controlled by elites left little room for upward mobility. Poverty deepened in many rural areas. And then came disaster. Calabria sits in one of Italy's most seismically active zones. In 1783, a devastating series of earthquakes struck the region. Entire towns collapsed. Tens of thousands died. Landscapes were permanently altered. Later in 1908, one of the deadliest earthquakes in European history struck the Strait of Messina, devastating Reggio Calabria and nearby Messina in Sicily. Buildings crumbled, fire spread, and a tsunami followed. The losses were staggering. Earthquakes are not just geological events here. They're historical turning points. They shape architecture, they influence migration, and they reinforce a culture of resilience. In 1861, Calabria became part of unified Italy. But unification did not immediately bring prosperity. Instead, the region experienced what many historians call a crisis of expectation. Hopes were high, reality was harsh. Banditry spread in the countryside, economic inequality persisted, infrastructure lagged behind northern Italy. Calabria remained proud but poor. And so, beginning in the 19th century and accelerating into the 20th, hundreds of thousands of Calabrians left. They boarded ships for the United States, for Argentina, for Canada, for Australia. Entire villages were emptied of young men, and families followed. If you meet an Italian-American family today with roots in southern Italy, there's a strong chance those roots trace back to Calabria. Migration is not just a footnote here, it was a defining chapter. There's one more elephant in the room in Calabrian history that must be named here, and that's the 'ndrangheta. Calabria's organized crime network emerged in the 19th century, rooted in the same period of economic desperation, feudal inequality, and state absence that drove mass migration. For communities with no functioning institutions, no reliable courts, no economic ladder, parallel structures of authority filled the gap. Over more than a century, what began as a local criminal organization evolved into something vastly complex. Today, the 'ndrangheta operates internationally with networks documented across Europe, the Americas, and Australia. And it's considered by investigators to be among the most powerful organized crime structures in the world. And it's also a real and serious part of Calabria's history. Calabria is a region of more than 5 million people, the overwhelming majority of whom live ordinary, honest lives, and who carry the weight of their region's reputation with a mixture of frustration and fierce pride. The travelers I know who love Calabria most are precisely the people who went in open-eyed and understood the complexity and found the beauty deep underneath it. Knowing this history gives you a more honest picture of the region, its structural poverty, its institutional failures, its long relationship with the Italian state that never fully delivered on promises. During World War I, Calabrian soldiers fought far from home in the trenches of northern Italy and beyond. Then came World War II. In 1943, Allied forces landed in Calabria as part of the invasion of mainland Italy after the campaign in Sicily. The region experienced bombardment and military occupation, though it avoided some of the destruction seen in the larger industrial cities. Post-war recovery was slow. In the 1950s and 60s, a second wave of migration occurred, this time not overseas, but northward in Italy. Calabrians moved to Turin, Milan, and Genoa to search jobs. The South continued to empty. Yet, despite invasions and earthquakes and poverty and migration, Calabria endured. Its traditions remained strong, family structures remained central, Catholic devotion remained visible. Festivals remained vibrant, and with that layered endurance, we'll move into the town, the capital, Catanzaro. Catanzaro sits in central Calabria, perched on a ridge between the Ionian Sea and the inland mountains. It's often called a city between two seas because on clear days you can see both the Ionian and Tyrrhenian seas from the elevated points surrounding the territory. Few places in Italy can claim that. The city overlooks the Gulf of Squillace on the Ionian coast. It rises dramatically from the valley below. Its historic center, built along steep hills, is both strategic and defensive. Today, Catanzaro has a population of roughly 90,000 residents, depending on how you count the broader metropolitan area. It's not a large capital like Milan or Naples. It's administrative rather than grand. Catanzaro became the official capital of Calabria in 1970 when Italy established regional governments as we know them today. Prior to that, administrative functions were more fluid and cities like Reggio Calabria played significant roles. In fact, Catanzaro was named capital and protests erupted in Reggio Calabria, where many residents believed their city should hold the title. Catanzaro's origins trace back to the Byzantine foundations in the early medieval period, though the surrounding area had been inhabited long before. Under the Byzantines, it developed a fortified settlement. Under the Normans, it expanded, and during the medieval period, it became known for something unexpected: silk. Catanzaro became one of southern Italy's most important silk-producing centers. In fact, during the 15th and 16th centuries, Catanzaro's silk artisans were so skilled that they were invited to other parts of Italy and even to France to share their techniques. Today, Catanzaro serves as the administrative center of Calabria. Regional government offices are here, courts, institutions, and universities. Next, we'll begin our walk of Catanzaro, but you know I always have to stop at the pasticceria before I head into town. Pasticceria Giovan Battista. Established in the early 20th century, this pasticceria is one of Catanzaro's most historic and respected pastry shops. It's right in the center of the old town, and it's long been a gathering place for locals to order their cappuccino or cornetto, or try a traditional Calabrian almond pastry. From here, we'll step out onto Corso Monsini, the main artery of the historic center. The street rises and curves gently along the ridge, lined with palazzi, churches, and small boutiques. It feels local and lived in. We'll stop at the Cathedral of Catanzaro, which sits at the center of the historic district. It's been here in one form or another since 1121. That's when the Normans built the first structure on the site, dedicating it to Santa Maria Assunta and the apostles Peter and Paul. A century later, in 1222, Pope Callisto II consecrated it. The relics of San Vitaliano were sent to Catanzaro in recognition of the city's welcoming of the Pope, and the relics have been here ever since. In 1309, a chapel dedicated to San Vitaliano was added on the left side of the facade. It became the center of the city's cult following the patron saint. Inside that chapel, niches hold the relics of San Vitaliano along with two earlier protectors from the city's Byzantine era, San Fortunato and San Ireneo. Three saints, centuries of devotion, poured into one small space. Then the earthquakes came. In 1638, a quake brought down the facade. Repairs followed. Then a World War II bombing damaged the cathedral again, leading to a reconstruction that historians and locals describe as controversial. Despite all of that, look at what survived. The facade has 3 bronze doors. The side facing the cathedral square has 3 more. To the right, a 42-meter bell tower rises above the roofline, topped by a bronze statue of the Assumption of Mary. When you step inside, the atmosphere is quiet and restrained. Your eyes go to the silver bust of San Vitaliano, the work of a Neapolitan silversmith named Gilberto Lello. Across the nave, a statue of the Madonna delle Grazie dates to 1595, likely from a Messina school. There's an 18th century depiction of the death of the Virgin and a canvas of the Holy Family painted in 1834. In the apse, another 18th century painting of the Assumption looks down over the whole interior. In 1984, Pope John Paul II visited the cathedral, 8 centuries after Callisto II. The same building, rebuilt, repaired, and still standing. San Vitaliano's feast day falls in July. When it arrives, processions move through the streets the way they have for centuries. The whole city turns out, the relics travel, and the bells ring from the 42-meter tower. Right now, the cathedral is undergoing a major restoration. 9 million euros were committed by the Italian Ministry of Infrastructure. The goal is to preserve the traditional character of the facade while updating interior spaces. Catanzaro is not letting this building go. Just a short walk, we'll turn down one of Catanzaro's most important streets and turn to the Complesso Monumentale di San Giovanni, the monumental complex of St. John. This dates back to 1070. Robert Guiscard, the Norman military leader who reshaped southern Italy, built a castle on this hill, the highest point in the city. He chose the spot deliberately because from here you can control the valley. You can see what's coming. The castle was built to defend against the Saracen raids. It was not a military structure, but also a feudal court. Power and defense still together on the same hill. That's the Norman way. The castle stood for centuries, then was partially destroyed in the 15th century. But Catanzaro did not waste what it had. The stone from the castle walls was dismantled and recycled to build what came next. The Church of Saints John the Baptist and St. John the Evangelist, constructed on the same ground in the 16th century. Then the Congrega dei Bianchi di Santa Croce, one of the city's most important religious brotherhoods, established itself here in 1563. A hospital followed in 1569, a convent in 1645, then barracks and a prison. The single site has been used as a fortress, a church, a convent, a hospital, a barracks, and a prison in sequence over centuries. The walls absorbed all of it. Today it functions as a cultural exhibition space and one of the most important in southern Italy. It reopened in 1998 after restoration. This complex sits on Piazza Garibaldi, right in the center of the historic district. Walk the inner courtyard, look at what has survived. Only one Norman tower stands. The castle walls are still here. Set into those walls, and a detail I love, is a famous fountain topped by a bronze statue called Cavatore. This is a quarryman, a figure celebrating physical labor, the strength of the working people. Built around 1870. It is one of the symbols of Catanzaro, and it makes sense why it's here, embedded in the stone of the Norman fortress. Below the complex, there's something that most visitors never discover: tunnels. Limestone galleries carved beneath the hill. For decades, stories were passed down about nobles using these underground passages to move between their palaces and the church without being seen on the street. Whether it's legend or fact, the tunnels are real, and you can walk them. At the end, you stand at a panoramic terrace and look outward. From here, you can see across the valley in both directions, and on a clear day, you can see both coasts. You also see the Byzantine Bridge, called by the locals as simply U Ponte e Catanzaro, the Bridge of Catanzaro. It's one of the defining images of the city, visible from almost every elevated point in the historic center. It's not just a piece of infrastructure, it's a serious work of engineering. The bridge was designed by Riccardo Morandi and completed in 1962. Morandi was the most celebrated Italian bridge engineer of the 20th century, a man who understood reinforced concrete the way a sculptor understands his stone, who believed that structural logic and visual beauty were not competing values, but the same proposition. His own words about the bridge: a work of art of particular expressiveness, designed with criteria of monumentality, without the aid of useless decorations. The statistics are worth knowing. A single arch of 231 meters across, more than 2 football fields, spanning the valley in one leap. No central pier touching the ground below it. The arch rises 110 meters above the valley floor. At the time of its construction, it was the second largest single arch bridge in the world, but it remains the largest in Italy. Our next stop will be a stop for lunch at Ristorante Abruzzino, a Michelin-starred restaurant in Catanzaro. It was the first restaurant in all of Calabria to receive a Michelin star. That happened in 2013. This is a family operation. Antonio Abruzzino founded it. His son Luca now runs the kitchen. His wife Rosetta manages the dining room. 3 people who know exactly what they're doing and have been doing it together for decades. What they cook is Calabrian. Luca grew up with these ingredients: Calabria's bergamot, which grows almost nowhere else in the world; tropea onions, sweet, red, and irreplaceable; salted cod, aubergine, chili and everything, local olive oil that is generous, seafood from 2 coasts. The food is specific to the place. I'll offer another restaurant if you don't want to be at a Michelin star restaurant over lunch, but before I do that, let's talk about what to eat here in Calabria. Calabrian cuisine tells you everything about the region: its history, its landscape, its character. We'll start with Nuja. It is Calabria's most famous culinary export and arguably its most honest one. A soft, spreadable pork salami blended with an abundance of Calabrian chili pepper. It's deeply spicy, deeply savory, and deeply regional. You'll find it stirred into pasta sauces, spread on toasted bread, melted into beans, folded into pizza. It originated in Spilinga on the Tyrrhenian coast, but belongs to all of Calabria. The pasta to order is filegia. It's Calabria's traditional handmade shape. Dough rolled around a thin rod to create a twisted, hollow strand that holds sauce the way nothing else can. It's chewy, rustic, and substantial. You will most often see it paired with a tomato sauce or a pork ragu. Cheese matters here. Look for Pecorino Crotonese, a sheep's milk cheese that ranges from fresh and mild to aged and sharp, often served simply with bread and good olive oil. The flavor is salty and grassy, much like the landscape it comes from. You may also encounter Provola, another Calabrian cheese with a firm texture and a distinctive smoky quality when it's aged. The red onion of Tropea, La Cipolla Rosa di Tropea, appears everywhere, even though Tropea itself is on the Tyrrhenian coast. The onions hold a protected IGP status and are famous for their surprising sweetness. Do not expect it to be sharp. It's almost delicate. You'll find it in salad, on pizza, and in jam. They are one of Calabria's most prized ingredients. Along the Ionian coast near Catanzaro Lido, you'll eat seafood simply: grilled swordfish, fresh anchovies, sardines, and calamari, with olive oil, lemon, and nothing complicated. Coastal food is about freshness, not elaboration. The sea provides, and the kitchen steps back. And running through it all, the thread that connects every course is the peperoncino, Calabrian chili pepper. Dried on balconies, strung into garlands, crushed into oil, folded into sauces, Calabria is Italy's spiciest region, and not apologetically so. If you love heat, you found your place. If you're sensitive to spice, ask before you order. Finish dinner with a glass of Amaro. Calabria produces herbal liquors drawn from the wild mountain botanicals of the Sila and other mountains, bitter, complex, and warming. The alternate for lunch is the trattoria in Vino Veritas. If a bruzzino is something you would prefer for a special occasion or dinner, the trattoria in Vino Veritas is everyday Calabrian. This is the kind of place where locals will come to eat. The antipasti alone can be a meal: local salami, aged pecorino, stuffed peppers, olive, and savory pies, made from whatever the market is offering that morning. As far as pasta, you will find the filegia here, twisted Calabrian pasta with sauce or mushrooms from the Sila Plateau. The wine is regional, the staff is friendly, and the way southern Italy hospitality tends to be. Attentive without formality, happy to talk about what you're eating. Our next stop is the Basilica dell'Immacolata, the oldest church in Catanzaro. The Basilica dell'Immacolata, or the Basilica Minor of St. Mary Immaculate, traces its origins to 1252, when the Bishop Fortunato ordered a church to be built on the site and entrusted it to the Franciscan friars. It was originally dedicated to the Holy Trinity. The Franciscans gave it a second name, St. Francis of Assisi, and it became one of the centers of religious life in the city. Then came 1641. The plague arrived in Catanzaro. It was devastating. In desperation, the city's administrators made a public vow to the Madonna. If she spared Catanzaro, they would honor her here every year forever. The city was spared. The vow was solemnized in 1660. The church was renamed for the Immaculate Conception of Mary. And every year since, on December 8th, my birthday, the Feast of the Immaculate Conception takes place. The city's municipal government walks in formal procession to this basilica and offers a votive candle. That has not stopped in over 360 years. The building you see today was rebuilt and reinaugurated in 1763 after the earthquake. The facade is Baroque, ornate, and layered with a 3-story bell tower rising above it. Step into the entrance and the interior opens up into a Latin cross with 3 wide naves. The frescoes are from the Cefalù school. The polychrome marble altars are rich and detailed, each one commissioned by a local family. But the piece that draws people in is the wooden statue of the Virgin, over 2 meters tall, dressed in a silk robe and embroidered with silver and gold. Of Catanzaro call her the Madonna della Nicchia, the Madonna of the Niche, for the way she stands in her alcove above the shrine. She has been here in some form since the early history of the church. The 2 altars inside have been declared national monuments, the altar for the Immacolata and the altar of San Vitaliano, the city's patron saint. There is a darker story, too. In 1982, thieves broke in and stole 10 silver Calabrias, 13 terracotta figurines from the 18th century Napoleon nativity scene, 2 oil paintings on copper. Years passed. Then in 1988, the Carabinieri, the police, spotted one of the stolen paintings in the Porta Portese flea market in Rome and recovered it. The rest remains missing. The basilica stands at the center of daily Catanzaro life. Shops on either side, people passing through the piazza, and on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, you might find some men sitting outside, a family lighting a candle inside, a child running through the threshold, and this is sacred and ordinary side by side. As far as a beach day, after exploring the hills of Catanzaro's center, we can descend from stone staircases and cathedral domes toward the salt air and the Ionian Sea. A short drive, about 10 kilometers, roughly 6 miles, the shift is complete. You move from 300 meters above sea level down to the coast, from medieval to coastal openness. It's called the Costa del Aranci, the Coast of Oranges. And the body of water curving before you is the Gulf of Squillace, one of the most storied inlets on the Ionian coast of Calabria. Catanzaro Lido, the beach, sits at the center of the coast. It has a seafront promenade called the Lungomare Stefano Pugliese, and it runs the length of the town lined with palm trees, cafes, and gelaterie, also benches facing the water. In the summer, concerts happen here. In the evening, families walk it slowly, children on bicycles, couples, groups of friends who have nowhere to go and no reason to hurry. The beach itself is broad, shallow, calm water. The Ionian here is known for clarity and warmth, generally calmer than the Tyrrhenian coast on the opposite side of Calabria, which is only about 30 kilometers away from town. Along the Lungomare, look for 2 landmarks most visitors pass without stopping. The first is Ancora, an imposing monument dedicated to the fallen at sea. The second is the Tonina Tower that rises 30 meters above the seafront. The tower was part of an old Legonda tannin factory, a remnant of industrial history embedded in what is now a leisurely promenade. The beachfront is a mix of organized beach spots, beach clubs with umbrellas, loungers, and small restaurants and bars right on the water. There's a free beach area where you can lay down your towel. In July and August, this coast is fully alive. You'll hear music from the beach bars. You'll see tables set almost directly on the sand, plates of local seafood arriving with cold wine from somewhere close by. Experience is beyond the beach. You can still discover the silk heritage of Catanzaro. The story began in the Byzantine era, when the monks first introduced silkworms into Calabria and planted the mulberry trees that feed them. By the 14th and 15th centuries, Catanzaro had developed into what scholars describe as the silk capital of Calabria, and its reputation extended across the continent. The city's velvets and brocades were traded internationally. Catanzaro silk was worn in European courts. Vatican vestments were made here. The name of the city may even derive from the Byzantine word kataroi, meaning silk spinners. The first experience will be going to Catanzaro's town hall, Palazzo dei Nobili. You can contact the Historical Association and arrange to see one of the only surviving replicas of Giovanni il Cabrese loom, the traditional Calabrian silk loom that was foundation of the city's textile industry. The second and more immersive is a short drive from the city about 15 kilometers south, is the small village of San Floro. This is where you'll find the Cooperative of Silk. It's housed in the Caracalo Castle, a structure dating from the 1400s, and it's one of the most remarkable small experiences in all of Calabria. It's a working cooperative, a passionate generation of artists, many of them young, many of them returning to Calabria specifically to receive this tradition, to operate full silk production cycle on site. Silkworms are bred here, mulberries are grown here, the fiber is extracted by hand. The dyeing uses natural pigments. The weaving is done on women's looms by hand using the same ancient methods. The products that result from the process, scarves, fabric, and silk goods, are sold exclusively to some of the world's leading fashion houses. Guided tours are available. Contact the cooperative before you arrive, and I'll include the link in the blog associated with this podcast. The blogs are, of course, on my website at KaterinaFerrara.com. You can also do an experience in Catanzano's markets, either with a guide or by yourself. The produce of the season is here, and it changes with the calendar. In summer, you'll find eggplants, tomatoes, pepper, zucchini. In autumn, mushrooms from the Sila Plateau and chestnuts, citrus beginning to arrive. The nduja deserves a moment. It's soft, spicy, spreadable, and sold here. If you speak even a few words of Italian, use them at the market. Vendors are often happy to share with you their family's traditions. You can also drive between the two Z's. Catanzaro sits on the narrowest point of the island peninsula, the Isthmus of Catanzaro. From coast to coast, the distance is about 35 kilometers, and on a clear day, at the right elevation, you can see both the Ionian and the Tyrrhenian. You can drive through the hills to the city and down to the other side. I mentioned the feast of San Vitaliano in mid-July, but I also want to talk about Holy Week here in Catanzaro because it's one of the most significant in all of Calabria. The timing depends each year, of course, on when Easter falls. Catanzaro's signature Good Friday procession, widely considered one of the most important in the region, is called the Naka. The word itself refers to the cradle, the pendulum, the swaying motion of the statue being carried through the streets. Confraternities and brotherhoods dressed in traditional robes walk in a slow procession through the historic center, carrying a statue of the Madonna Addolorata, the Madonna of Sorrows, and the coffin of dead Christ. On Easter Sunday, the mood shifts entirely, and grief becomes celebration. The affrontata takes place in the city square, a ritual encounter between the statue of the risen Christ and the statue of the Virgin Mary. They're brought together, each from different directions, and when they meet, the crowd responds. This is southern Italy Easter, not quiet or restrained. Day trips from Catanzaro. The first one is Crotone, approximately 75 kilometers, about 46 miles. Driving time, about an hour. And unusually for Calabria, there is a train option. The Ionian coastal rail line runs directly from Catanzaro Lido, near the beach. This is a day trip for anyone who came to southern Italy because of its ancient history. Crotone is Magna Grecia. This was Croton, one of the most powerful Greek city-states in the ancient Mediterranean. Founded in the 8th century BC by colonists from the region of Achaia, on the Greek mainland. It became immediately, not over centuries, but immediately a political, religious, and cultural center for the Greek world in Italy. When you go to Crotone, you'll arrive at the Capo Colonna, a single Doric column rising from the headland above the Ionian Sea. 48 columns once supported the temple of Hera here, a great sanctuary that stood on the promontory, one of the most important sacred sites in the entire Mediterranean. People came from across the Greek world to worship here. The sanctuary was so wealthy, so renowned, it likely served as a headquarters of the Italiot League, the political confederation of Greek cities in southern Italy. Hannibal retreated here during the Second Punic War. He stood on the promontory as his Italian campaign ended, preparing to sail back to Carthage. He left a bilingual inscription in Greek and Punic describing his campaigns and an offering to the goddess. One of the 48 columns remains. Here, the archaeological park covers 50 hectares, 30 of excavated ruins, 20 of Mediterranean woodland and scrub. You can walk the wall, the sacred boundary built in the Roman times. You can see the foundations of both temples. The park feels uncrowded even in the summer. You can also go to the National Archaeological Museum of Crotone in the city center. It holds the treasure of Hera, discovered in 1987 between a smaller temple adjacent to the main sanctuary. The treasure includes votive offerings, bronze statuettes, a gold diadem worn by a cult of the goddess, and a remarkable bronze model of a ship, complete with chariots and doves. Objects imported from Greece left as gifts to Hera over the centuries. They were hidden and found again 2,500 years later intact. The museum also holds a 5th century Corinthian bronze helmet offering from athletes who competed in the ancient world, and exhibits offering a full arc of the region's history and from prehistoric to medieval times. After the museum, walk the seafront in the historic center. Try the sardella crotonese, sometimes called the caviar of Calabria, a spiced paste of fish and chili, and the local pecorino crotonese, a sheep's milk cheese you've already encountered in Catanzaro's markets. Option 2 is Tropea, approximately 115 kilometers west, about 71 miles. Train is technically possible, but connections take patience. A car would be recommended for this trip. The town sits on a sandstone cliff above the Tyrrhenian Sea. The old buildings growing directly from the cliff's edge, vertical, uncompromising, densely stacked. Below them, a broad, white sand beach with crystal waters in shades of green and turquoise that seem too vivid to be real in person. The coast is called the Costa degli Dei, the coast of the gods. It earned its name. You'll likely have seen photographs of Tropea without knowing you had. It's everywhere. The image that travelers assume is Amalfi or the Cinque Terre is often Tropea. The church here is Santa Maria dell'Isola. Start there and look back to the old town from the balcony at the end of Corso Vittorio Emanuele. There's a staircase carved into the cliff that descends to beach level. From here you see the approach to the promontory. That was centuries ago a true island, completely surrounded by water, but silt and sediment filled the channel over time, connecting the island to the shore. The name stuck, dell'Isola, Maria of the Island. The church is modest inside, white walls, simple altar. Benedictine monks held the site from the 11th century onward. The building has been destroyed and rebuilt multiple times, most significantly after the earthquake of 1783. There's a garden behind the church and a terrace with a 360-degree panorama. Entrance to the church is free. The garden and terrace is a small fee, pay it. In the town itself, walk the old streets, Corso Vittorio Emanuele, the cathedral which holds a Byzantine icon of the Madonna of Romania, the town's patron, and notably 2 unexploded World War II bombs now diffused and displayed in a kind of artifact of modern history. And of course, the onions, the Cipolla rosa di Tropea, with their IGP status. Grown on the coast and sold throughout Italy and Europe, in Tropea you find them everywhere. In the markets, in the restaurants, with cheese. They're genuinely different from other red onions. Spend time on the beach if the water here is cold and clear, the sand is pale. The cliff backdrop makes it one of the most dramatic beach settings you'll encounter anywhere. Tropea is popular in July and August. The old town can feel crowded, but if you go in June, September, or October, the experience is quieter and the light is still extraordinary. The drive from Catanzaro crosses the Ionian side to the Tyrrhenian side, over the narrowest part of the Italian peninsula. If you're choosing a one-day trip from Catanzaro purely for visual impact and photographs, this is it. Our third town will be Reggio Calabria, approximately 160 kilometers, about 100 miles. Driving time is 2 hours. Train is possible from Catanzaro Lido, but the journey is longer, and it should be planned as a full day. Reggio Calabria is the southernmost city of mainland Italy. It sits directly across the Strait of Messina from Sicily. On a clear day, which is most days, you can see Mount Etna from the waterfront. The strait is narrow, less than 3 kilometers at its narrowest. The current runs fast and visible between the shores. The city's lungomare, the beachfront promenade, runs right along the strait. It's frequently described as one of the most beautiful waterfront walks in Italy. Wide, palm-lined, facing west and south toward the volcano on the island. In the evening, the light over the strait is beautiful. If you're going to go to Reggio Calabria, do one thing, and that is see the race bronzes. They're in the Museo Nazionale della Magna Grecia, the Greater Greece Museum, in Piazza Paolo Orsini in the city center. And standing in front of them is one of those travel experiences that is genuinely difficult to describe in advance because nothing quite prepares you for the physical presence of these ancient Greek bronze sculptures at this scale. The bronzes were found in 1972. They're large. The taller figure stands nearly 2 meters. They are detailed in a way that stone sculpture cannot match. Veins in the arms, individual strands of hair, teeth of silver, lips of copper. They were cast separately in pieces and assembled. In their original state, they carried weapons, a spear and a shield, now lost. They're known as Statue A and Statue B, and it's well worth your time visiting them. After the museum, walk the lungomare, find a cafe facing the strait, order whatever the waiter recommends. Reggio's cuisine is both Calabrian and Sicilian. Swordfish is common and excellent here, and if time allows, visit the historic city center and the Cathedral of Reggio Calabria, rebuilt after the catastrophic 1908 earthquake. And there's also an Aragonese castle. In this episode, we traveled deep into Calabria, from the Greek foundations of Magna Grecia to Roman rule, Byzantine monasteries, Norman fortresses, Spanish control, Bourbon governance, earthquakes, migration, and war, uncovering the region shaped not by reinvention, by endurance. We explored Catanzaro, the modern capital since 1970, perched between 2 seas. We visited Crotone, Tropea, and Reggio Calabria. Calabria is layered: wind, stone, spice, and survival, a region that absorbs history rather than erasing it. In our next episode of the Regional Capitals of Italy series, we head out to Sardinia, the island to the north. This journey is taking us north to south, from the continent to the islands, from Turin to Palermo, from Savoy courts to Sicilian markets, in just a little over 20 episodes. If you've been traveling with me week by week, thank you truly. If you're just joining, you've got some catching up to do. Each episode has an associated blog on my website at KaterinaFerrara.com. And please sign up for my free travel newsletter. I will see you next Friday. Until then, travel slowly, travel deeply, and let the cities tell their stories.